Dear children, we are going to begin with the new lesson, chapter 7 in your statistics for economics, and the name of the chapter is correlation. Now, what is meant by this correlation? Now, before moving on to the word correlation, let me explain you about the variables which you have learned in chapter 2 of the same textbook. Variables, what are the variables? Variables are those components which are always subjected to changes. Okay, X variables, Y variables, isn't it? Now, for example, year and production of wheat in tons. Year is given as 1993, 1994, 1995. 1993, 1994, 1995. 1 year difference is there, isn't it? 1993 to 1994, it is changing. It is a variable, X variable. Now, what is the corresponding data related to that? Production of grains in different years, production of wheat. In 1993, the production of wheat is 103 million tons. In 1994, the production of wheat has again increased from 103 to 113 million tons. So, that is an example which I can give you for the variables. Now, here X and Y are variables. Again, in 1994, the production of wheat has increased to 104 tons, decreased to 104 tons. So, there is a difference in the values represented here, X and Y variables. Now, here again another example, year 1993, 1994 and 1995 is an X variable. Corresponding to those X variables, the number of students in commerce batch, in science batch, two different columns. So, how many variables are there here? X is a variable representing the year, Y is a variable which represents the students of commerce batch, and Z is another variable which represents the students of science batch. So, in different years, the number of students in a school, in a college will be different. In 1993, the number of students in commerce department may be 112. In 1994, it may be 130. In 1995, again it will be 140. Similarly, in the science batch, in 1993, number of students will be 100. In 1994, number of students will be 120. In 1995, the number of students will be 200. So, here 3 variables are there, one representing the year, second one representing the number of students in the commerce batch, and the third variable Z representing the number of students in the science batch. Now, here you can find these variables are changing. They are changing components. That is why they are named as variables. And I told you when you study statistics, you will have different variables such as X, Y, Z, etc. Now, why we are introducing, why we are learning, why we are pointing out variables here? Correlation is something which learns the relationship between the variables. So, that is a better understanding for correlation. So, if you know variables, it is easy to understand what is a correlation. What is a correlation? The correlation is a measure in statistics which helps us to learn the relationship between different variables. There are so many variables when we speak in economics and in statistics. There are so many variables, isn't it? So, to know or to learn the relationship between these variables, a measure which is used in statistics is correlation. Now, let us define correlation. Correlation helps us to examine the relationship between the variables. So, if there are different variables, how one variable is related to the other. To know the relationship between the variables, we use the measure correlation. Now, let us move on to, that is a simple definition of correlation. Correlation is a measure which is used in statistics to know, to understand the relationship between the two variables. How are the two variables are related to each other? Anyway, they are variables. And how are these variables related to each other? That is what correlation speaks about. Types of correlation. Next topic is types of correlation. So, you know what is a correlation? Correlation means it is a measure used in statistics to study about the relationship between the two variables. Now, for a simple understanding, I can give you two variables that you have learned in economics: price and demand. Both price and demand, both of them will change accordingly, and they are two variables. How those variables are related to each other, you can recollect, isn't it? When price increases, demand decreases, and when price decreases, demand increases. If the price is 2 rupees, demand is 5 kilograms. If the price is 3 rupees, demand is 2 kilograms. So both are changing. So these variables, how do they change? How do the variables changes? How do the variable price and demand changes? In an opposite direction, isn't it? When the price is increased, demand is decreased, and when the price is decreased, demand is increased. So this is the relationship between the variables. So to know how far these variables are related to each other, what is their degree of relationship, we use the measure correlation. Now, before using the measure correlation, we have to learn about which are the different types of correlation. Now, the first topic, correlation, is over, and we are moving on to the types of correlation. First correlation, first type is positive correlation. What do I mean by positive correlation? From the word itself it is clear, isn't it? What is correlation? It is a measure which is used to study about the relationship between two variables. So what is positive correlation? When two variables moves in the same direction, it is called positive correlation. When two variables moves in the same direction, it is called positive correlation. Now, in economics, you have learned such variables. Supply is an example, isn't it? When price increases, producers are induced to supply more, and when price decreases, producers will supply less. So when price increases, supply also will go up. When price decreases, supply also comes down. There is a positive relation. Both of them moves in the same direction. That kind of relationship is known as positive correlation. So positive correlation is a type of correlation where two variables moves in the same direction. This is the example which I have given you. When price is 2, supply is 10. When price is increased, supply is also increased. When price is increased to 6, supply is also increased to 18. Positive relationship. Next is negative correlation. Now, if positive correlation is supply and price, negative correlation is demand and price, isn't it? So how will you define that? When two variables moves in an opposite direction, we call it as negative correlation. Example, demand and price. So when two variables move in an opposite direction, it is called negative correlation. Example, demand and price. When price is 10, demand is 4. When price is 8, demand has increased to 6. When price is again falling to 6, demand is increased to 9. So when the price falls, demand increases. Two variables moves in an opposite direction. That is called negative correlation. Now the next one is linear correlation. What is linear correlation? When two variables changes in a constant proportion, it is called linear correlation. Both the two variables, if they are changing in a constant proportion, in the same proportion, then we call it as a linear correlation. So the example which I have written you will make you very clear. These are the two variables A and B, or you can name it as X and Y, no problem at all. You can see X is moving or A is moving as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 with a gap of 2. Here also Y with a gap of 5 they are moving, isn't it? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. Whether it is increasing or decreasing. That means 14, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10 and 5. Whether it is increasing or decreasing, if they are moving in a constant proportion, that it should not be in the same proportion, like how X is behaving the same way Y need not behave. X is moving in a constant proportion with a difference of 2, at the same time Y is also moving at a constant proportion with a difference of 5. So both are moving in the same proportion. That kind of a movement is known as linear correlation. Okay, so from the beginning towards the end, x is moving in a constant proportion with a difference of 2. Likewise, y is also moving in a constant proportion with a difference of 5 from the beginning till the end. Okay. Next we will move on to non-linear correlation. What is non-linear correlation? That means they won't be moving in a specific or constant proportion, right? Because it is non-linear. When there is no specific relationship between two variables, it is called non-linear correlation. Here you can find x or a is moving with a constant proportion 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. But let us consider y or b variable 3, 7, 12, 18, 25, 32, 41. There is no constant proportion here. So x is moving in a constant proportion, but y is not moving in a constant proportion. Such kind of a relationship is known as non-linear correlation. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you. Positive correlation, when two variables moves in a same direction, it is called positive correlation, supply and price. When two variables move in an opposite direction, it is called a negative correlation, example demand and price. When two variables moves in a constant proportion, it is called linear correlation. And when the two variables are not moving in a constant proportion, so when there is no relationship, if they are moving in a different direction, that means one will be moving in a constant, other one will not be, or both of them will not be moving in a constant proportion, it can be considered as non-linear correlation. Now, apart from this, we need to discuss the other two types of correlation. One is simple correlation and multiple correlation. What is meant by simple correlation and multiple correlation? Now, regarding the simple correlation, if we are learning the relationship between two variables, we can call it as a simple correlation. Not single, simple, S-I-M-P-L-E, simple correlation. It studies the relationship between two variables only. But whereas multiple correlation, when the relationship between two or three variables are studied simultaneously, it is called multiple correlation. When we are learning about the relationship between 2-3 variables simultaneously, we call it as the multiple correlation. How the availability of rainfall is affecting the availability of food grains. Now, based on the availability of food grains, how the prices are going to change, how the price change is affecting the life of the people, all these are connected variables. So, if we are learning the relationship between multiple variables, we call it as multiple correlation. Okay. Now, we are moving on to degrees of correlation. Okay. Now, how far they are related? Now, you know, two variables are related to each other. How they are related? Now, that is what correlation studies. And we have learned different types of correlation. But we should know how far they are related. What is the degree of their correlation? Like how we learned about degree of price elasticity of demand and degree of price elasticity of supply. How far they are related? That is what we have to learn as the next topic. How are they? How far they are related? That is what we are going to learn as the next topic. Degrees of correlation. To what degree they are related? So, degrees of correlation can be discussed as perfect correlation as the first heading. Perfect correlation. In the perfect correlation, we have perfect positive correlation and perfect negative correlation. Perfect positive and perfect negative correlation. Now, in a perfect positive correlation, correlation is perfectly positive when the proportional change in the two variables is in the same direction. Now, just as we told about supply and the price, isn't it? Both the variables are moving in the same direction and they have the proportional change, same direction by same direction. Proportional change in the two variables in the same direction. In the same direction they will change, and how is their change? In a proportional manner. That is the most perfect way two variables can be related. How? In the same direction the movement will be and their change will be proportional. In that case, we can call it as a perfect positive correlation. Perfect positive correlation. Why it is called so? Because both the variables are moving in the same direction, positive, and how they are moving? Proportionate change. That makes them perfect. So, perfect positive correlation. So, how do we depict the degree of that perfect positive correlation? It will be positive 1. It will be positive 1 because both are moving in the same direction proportionately. Positive 1. Now, likewise we have perfect negative. Perfect negative means correlation is perfectly negative when proportional change in two variables are in the opposite direction. Both the variables are moving in an opposite direction like demand and price. That is negative. And how do they change? A proportional change is happening. Such kind of a correlation's degree is known as perfect negative correlation. And it will be -1. So, we know how far it is related. What is their correlation degree? +1. So, if somebody gives the answer as +1, at that time itself you can analyze. You will be able to know what is it. Both are moving in the same direction, proportionate change. If the answer is -1, what is your assessment? Both the variables are moving in an opposite direction, but their change is proportionate. Okay, that is known as perfect positive and perfect negative. So, we are discussing about degrees of correlation. In degrees of correlation, the first degree that we have learned is perfect positive and the second one is perfect negative. If it is a perfect positive, same direction, both the variables will be moving and their change will be proportionate. If it is perfect negative, both the variables will be moving in an opposite direction and their change will be proportionate. So, negative correlation is signified as -1, positive correlation is +1, and both comes under the heading perfect correlation because they are perfect. Next one, next degree is absence of correlation is the next degree. Absence of correlation means what? No relation between the variables. No relation between the variables. If the two variables are not related to each other, we can call it as absence of correlation. The price of a chocolate will not affect the price of a car, isn't it? They are not related at all. So, the two variables which are not having any kind of relationship, but they are variables, right? That is known as absence of correlation. There is absence of correlation, therefore, what will be the degree? 0. 0 degree, 0 correlation. Next one is limited degree of correlation. So, 3 types of degree we have to discuss here. First is perfect correlation. In that we discussed perfect positive and perfect negative. Perfect positive is +1, perfect negative is -1. Then next degree is absence of correlation, their degree is 0. Then the next one is limited degree of correlation. Limited degree of correlation is the next one. Here the degree of correlation ranges between 0 and 1. Just now we discussed 0 as well as 1. 1 in the sense +1 and -1, isn't it? So, this limited degree of correlation lies between this range 0 and 1. Now, under this limited degree of correlation, we have to discuss 3 types of degrees. Which are they? First one is high degree of correlation, second one is moderate degree of correlation, and the third one is low degree of correlation. Okay. Now, let us first see high degree of correlation. In high degree of correlation, here the correlation of two variables lies between 0.75 and 1. It will be close to 1 because it is high degree of correlation. Therefore, it will be close to 1. Close to 1 means it lies between 0.75 and 1. So, if you are getting the answer as high degree of correlation, what should be your assessment? The relationship between those two variables lies near to 1. That means somewhere between 0.75 and 1. That should be your assessment. Okay. Now, next one is moderate. Moderate means The correlation of two variables lies between 0.25 and 0.75. It is in the middle range, isn't it? It lies between 0.25 and 0.75. Okay, so if you are learning about a particular relationship between two variables and if you are getting the answer as 0.50, we will be finding out the correlation by using the different statistical tools. At that time, if you are getting the answer as 0.50, what will be your assessment? The two variables are moderately related. Moderate. Okay. Now comes the next one, low degree of correlation. It lies between 0 to 0.25. It lies between 0 to 0.25. It is a low degree of correlation. Okay. So, there are 3 degrees of correlation mainly we have to discuss. One comes under the perfect correlation, perfect positive and perfect negative, that is positive 1, negative 1. Then absence of correlation 0, then limited degree of correlation which lies between 0 and 1. In that we have high, moderate and low. In high the values are close to 1, between 0.75 to 1. In medium it is 0.25 to 0.75 and in low it is from 0 to 0.25. So, these are the different degrees of correlation. Now, I told you limited degree of correlation, it ranges from 0 to 1. So, when we discuss about 1, both positive and negative 1 will be there in the topic, isn't it? So, a table is framed for you for a better understanding. Now, let us learn the table. First one is perfect. There we have perfect positive, perfect negative. Okay. Next is high, which comes under limited degree. Just now we discussed. That is between 0.75 and 1. So, when we write it in positive, how will you write? Between positive 0.75 and positive 1. Likewise, we have a negative also, isn't it? Between minus 0.75 and minus 1. Okay. Next is moderate. Moderate lies between 0.25 and 0.75. So, how will you write it for positive? Between positive 0.25 and positive 0.75. When we write it in a negative aspect, between minus 0.25 and minus 0.75. Next is low, that is between 0 and 0.25, positive 0.25 when we write it in positive perspective. Then next is between 0.0 and minus 0.25 for negative. Last one is 0, that remains to be 0 on both the sides. So, this is how we learn about the degrees of correlation, because when we find correlation by using the formula, mainly we use 3 methods to find out the correlation. One is scatter diagram, the other one is Spearman's rank correlation method and Carl Pearson's correlation method. Now, for this year, CBSE has deleted the Spearman's rank correlation from your topic, and we need to learn only scatter diagram and Carl Pearson's method. While we use the Carl Pearson's method and do the problems, you will be getting the answers either in a positive or a negative manner. So, if it is negative, if it is minus 0.75 the answer that you are getting, you can write it as the high moderation, high correlation, degree of correlation. Okay. So, that is how you have to high degree of negative correlation. Okay. So, whenever you are getting the answer, if it is minus 0.25 that you are getting as an answer, that you can write there exists a moderate negative correlation, moderate negative correlation. So, this is how you have to answer the question, the comment that you have to write by analyzing the correlation, because we are asked to find out what is a relationship, what is the degree of their relationship. So, you have to write it in that way. If you are getting the answer as positive 0.25, isn't it? Positive 0.25. You can either, if it is close to positive 0.25 and if it is between 0.25, both you have to look into and write down the relationship accordingly. If it is positive, we can write it is positively a moderate correlation. If it is negative, you can write negative moderate correlation. So, depending on the values, you have to learn the table very well, and on the basis of the table you have to write the comment when you get the answer, because the question will be what kind of a correlation, what degree of a correlation exists between the two variables. So, after finding out the answer, you have to write down the comment based on that. So, learn this table very well. Okay. So, while you do the problem, this table is very essential. So, you have to copy down this table, then only it will be easy for you to when you do the problems or numericals. Okay. Thank you.